Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's SANS webcast, Security Gets Smart with AI, a SANS survey sponsored by BlackBerry Cylance. My name is Carol Auth of SANS, and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speakers are Ray Davidson, SANS Analyst and SANS Instructor, Barbara Filkins, Senior SANS Analyst, and Brett Leinmark, Senior Product Marketing Manager at BlackBerry Cylance. If during the webcast you have any questions for our presenters, please enter them into the questions window located on the GoToWebinar interface at any time. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to turn the webcast over to Ray.
Good afternoon, and excuse me for clicking that slide. There we go. Thank you for the help. My name and this set of vocal frequencies belongs to Ray Davidson, the first person on the speakers list. And I want to briefly introduce my colleague, Barbara Filkins, Senior SANS Analyst. Barb, what is your real name and what do you really do?
Well, I'm Barb Filkins in person, and what I really do for a living is largely security related and project management related in the healthcare space, though it looks like it may get more and more into the aviation space these days. It's another story. Back to you, Ray.
That's going to be another webcast, I think, how those relate. Brett, you're also joining us from the sponsor. Do you want to do a level set so everybody will know which voice is which? Oh, we got video.
Sure. I'm Brett Leinmark, and thanks for the introduction, Ray. I'm with Cylance. I've been here about 2.5 years, a little over that. I do positioning, messaging, and enablement, and the best part of my job is talking with good folk out in the community to find out what the latest challenges are in cybersecurity and how we might apply an artificial intelligence approach to that. So I'm up here in Portland, Oregon. If you look out the window, you can see a bridge right about here, but it's a great day to be an Oregonian.
Thanks, Brett. So I'm going to talk for a little bit. Barbara will talk for a little bit, and then Brett is going to talk about sponsor things. So here's the order we're going to go in. We're going to do some goals and objectives, and I apologize I was not able to get matching consonants on that one. But then we're going to go in demographics and definitions. Actually, we're going to do the definitions first because we want to talk about how we this and what our goals were, and then to the demographics of our responders. And then as we talk to our responders, we ask them about their own views of artificial intelligence. We will talk about the capabilities that they perceive there and the criteria that they look for when they apply an artificial intelligence enabled solution to a cybersecurity problem. There's some risks. And Barb and I will give some SANS recommendations if you're going to implement AI in your business. And, I really tried to get bed sticks in here too, but it wouldn't work. So with that in mind, why are we here? And this is not the cosmic question that everybody's been asking from way before 1956. This is just the question of why are we on this seminar. We're trying to determine perceptions and intentions of InfoSec practitioners with the goal of facilitating communication and increasing security. Now, that's a mouthful, but when Barb and I were approached to do this study, it had artificial intelligence, and I know that we don't all have the same view of what artificial intelligence is. And so that makes it very difficult to use it to solve problems. And it just seemed like there was going to be mutual interest and synergy, in other Dilbert terms, if we could do a survey and do a level set essentially across definitions and perceptions. So with that in mind, this is I know that this is an unusual slide to have, well, maybe conferences you go to, but the point of this slide is that we have been inundated information security with ideas about artificial intelligence since actually as far back as 1956, when there was the for cybersecurity. So cybersecurity. So in cybersecurity, we've all been trying to figure it out for a long time, and I think we're trying to figure out, is this meet the same as the old AI, the Roger Daltrey thing? We're trying to figure what is artificial intelligence, because back in 1956 there was one idea of what it was. You probably some of you on the webcast will be old enough to remember when a computer program beat a human at chess, and the reaction was, oh, well, you did that with calculations. That's not AI. So the attitude has become, in some ways, if you can explain it, it's not AI. And that's actually a quote from Douglas Hofstadter, who was misquoting somebody else. But there is that kind of attitude, very high level. However, that's higher level than cybersecurity. So we wanted to assess views of AI within the cybersecurity community. This is a list of characteristics of AI that I'm going to let Barb speak to, because she's done some research on artificial intelligence recently.
Okay, well, thanks, Ray. Basically, there are a whole bunch of different models out there as far as what people might think in terms of the characteristics of AI. But they largely lay it against what we as humans consider our non-artificial intelligence. And this is the model that we basically looked to for the survey that we did. So from a learning standpoint, being able to alter behavior based on past experiences, applying what you've learned in the past to new and unseen situations. One of the things may be the case, you touch a stove and it's hot, and then you learn how to be careful if you approach a standalone burner on the counter. Memory, encoding, storage, and retrieval of experiences, maybe a different structure in the human brain than in the computer model, in the computer world, but effectively, in that case, there's a lot of the similarity. Reasoning and abstraction. This is where you are able to draw logical conclusions and generalize based on sample data. Problem solving, being able to systematically come up with possible solutions and again derive the best answer to a problem. And then divergent thinking, be able to generate multiple solutions to a given problem based on past experience. So just as an example, I pulled this from another paper I've done in terms of what a platform might look like that utilizes artificial intelligence. In this particular case, we're looking at threat detection. And a large part of AI in the current environments is based around machine learning. It's an AI discipline, and it's a key driver between many of the practical advances that have been associated with the field. So in this particular case, let's take a quick look at a sample threat detection system enabled by AI and machine learning and some of the implementation concerns. Machine learning has proven to be extremely effective, but depending on the source and quality of the data being analyzed, they can produce vastly different results. And specific domain knowledge is really needed to design an AI platform, and this is no less in the security domain. You've heard about data scientists. Well, data scientists must apply security domain knowledge to identify primary and secondary sources of data and determine how to clean and transform acquired data, and then select the best analytical method or algorithm for the particular problem. In this particular case, we are looking at a domain that includes network packets, and machine learning-based analysis can reveal otherwise invisible communication patterns from an attacker inside the network. Secondary sources could be logs that are routinely collected from other devices and can provide additional depth to the analysis. But they're not necessarily direct evidence of activity because of the nature of their role in providing security defenses. In other words, they've already acquired a certain level of curation, if you will. The three basic layers that we look at once we get the data coming in. The first is the data acquisition and feature extraction. It's detected and captured in ways that allow for the analysis consistently. And a feature extraction module can convert the raw data into vectors or data sets. And this is the key step. Features that are improperly selected, back to the data quality, can have a negative effect on the performance of detection models. Then the next step is the real-time detection, which would determine whether an observed pattern or sequence of patterns is normal or abnormal based on the detection model and how the system has been trained. And then we get to the heart of the system, that block that says machine learning. It contains the various algorithms for anomaly detection, audit, of training data. It can be dynamically updated either by human analysts or the machine learning algorithms themselves, and the actual behavior-based detection model. Selection of the appropriate algorithm will always include several considerations, all of which can affect performance and the validity of the outcome. Things like accuracy, time it takes to train the platform, use of linearity, and the number of features and parameters. There's others to be concerned with as well. But the thing to remember is the human analyst is still part of this loop. They're going to be looking for what the platform delivers in terms of what it sees. They'll want the platform ultimately to be able to explain why it considers something a threat, and it will also be presenting the data in the best way for decision making without them having to go through a lot of those rote tasks that they have that are often underlying and in the background. Back.
Thanks, Barb, for that description and especially the specific example. And I have to say, I haven't seen Brett's presentation, but I'm sure that he's looking at this diagram and thinking how he can talk about their product in relation to this generic example. And I'm looking forward to that. No pressure or anything. So moving on, if I can get control, there we go. All right. So with that in mind, with the idea that we need to increase the ability of people in the information security space, that includes vendors, it includes consumers, and it includes people that are just interested and want to learn, who come to SANS classes. So we reached out to the usual suspects that respond to SANS surveys. We generally get a pretty good response, and I don't know the number. I think there were like 400. Barb would know. Our responders are generally weighted slightly towards small and medium-sized businesses that would be less than 5,000 workforce, but there is a pretty good spread. Top industries we got responding to this survey were tech and cybersecurity, banking and finance, and education and government. And I split those out because tech and security seem to go together. They're providing a technical service, and then they be wanting to enhance that service that they're providing. Banking and finance seem to be maybe more interested in protection and a more defensive sort of approach. And education and government really are just, in my experience dealing with both of those, it really is a resource-limited, resource-constrained situation. And so these may be like, the first one could be something defending forward, to use DoD terminology, banking and finance in a defensive posture, and education and government, maybe just getting by. We had in our responders 3-to-1 staff to management ratio. That's the people that are not management or operational folks. So when we actually, go ahead, Barbara.
Oh, I was going to just make a comment, Ray, on the demographic side. Not interrupting you, sorry. But the fact that we're oriented towards small businesses, that could be an artifact of the normal distribution of our surveys, but it also kind of highlights that this technology area, or I would say area because it includes a lot of stuff, is also something that the smaller businesses might be looking at because of staff shortages and the ability to do things better, quicker, faster type of thing. So back to you. I just wanted to put that in there as an injection.
Excellent point. That is just as a spoiler alert, AI is viewed very strongly as an enhancer of current resources rather than a replacer. So thanks, Barb. As we talk to people, ask them, this is getting back a little bit at defining artificial intelligence. we didn't want to, because of the differences in how people understand the terms, we didn't want to provide a definition to begin with, but we did want to give people a pick list, essentially, to give us guidance on how we communicate going forward. So we gave people a list of somebody's animated threat detectors going on there. We gave them a list of technologies that could be part of an AI-enabled solution and asked them to pick. So we get an idea of what kinds of technologies they associate with AI. And clearly, as we look at the kinds of things they're interested in, what it looks like to me is that predictive analytics, deep learning, and machine learning, those are all sort of broad capabilities of AI, but it's very difficult to talk about specific applications. We can pick particular ones, but overall, the use of predictive analytics is maybe it's a general kind of. Whereas we look farther down into the list, we get natural language processing, which really does limit the kind of data that you're looking at. For instance, we get image recognition, which again is a very particular applied sort of AI, and emotion recognition, speech recognition, these sorts of things. So in general, it looks like we're going from the general to the specific here. So when we went to the next question, and we asked people, now this was a subset of our population. I should have mentioned this. In our demographics, we looked for people who had AI solutions and people who were just generally interested in it. The previous slide, the people that were considering specific technologies as part of an AI-enabled solution, these were people that may or may not have implemented it. They were looking forward. If they're going to implement an AI solution, what would they be looking for? And in the next slide, which I'm sure is going to advance. There it goes. Thank you. Where are you planning to use these things? These were people that were actually planning projects. So we asked, if you were going to plan a project, where would you think about it? And then we asked the subset of people that were actually planning projects, where are you going to use AI? And again, we see at the very top, cyber defense. And I don't know about you, but I can't think of a broader term in information security than cyber defense. It's like everywhere, which is good news for AI vendors, I suppose. We get a little more specific with malware protection, APT detection, non-malware threats. So again, next is detecting threats. As we look down farther, we get responses to incidents, so response after the fact. You can look through this and see a very large list of potential applications that people are thinking of where they want to apply AI. And I that was posted in the chat. Barb and I don't get royalties for writing it or anything like that, but I do hope you'll read it and see if you can get something out of it. And I can get the slide to advance. I'm trying to click in. Okay, how does AI enable cybersecurity? Can somebody advance the slide? I'm not advancing. There we go. Oops. Right, okay. How do you see AI as an enabler for improved cybersecurity? Should be the slide that's on. This one was really interesting, and it sort of gets back to what I tried to foreshadow earlier. If we divided this out by industry, and I think this was Barb's idea, and it was really, really great idea. You look at technology and the cybersecurity service provider, we see the blue category is high. That's identification of unknown threats. It's also really high in banking and finance. And again, this looks like, to me, these industries are concerned with protection, and this is why they would be so interested in AI and unknown threats. We get down to education. I know people that look in education, the threats are like all over the map, and you're not really worried about APT because you can't keep the kids from downloading peer-to-peer stuff. Again, government federal is a much broader kind of application. Barb, this was your idea to consider, and it really is interesting, I think, how the different industries consider how they're going to apply AI. Do you want to? I apologize for putting you on the spot if you don't have anything to say, but if you do, now's your time.
Well, I think what struck me on this one is the fact that, banking and the service providers in education, those that are focused on the vertical, actually are looking to AI for identifying their threats. Whereas when you start looking at the providers of the tools and the services to a certain extent, but especially the technology, they're looking at being able to improve the times between that metric that we all look at, or one of the metrics we all look at, between infection and remediation, trying to get better. Those were kind of the two things that jumped out at me. So banking is looking to use the tools to identify the threats. Technology is looking to AI to enable better tools, kind of thing.
Yeah, I me too. Is for them, AI is almost part of the core business, and for the financial services, it's protecting the core business. It's an enabler through protection, to use the old business language. So I want to not take too much of the sponsor, but one of the things that we always sort of, well, I'm sorry, Brett. Some of us snicker behind our hands when we talk about AI, and if you're in the business, I know you know that. So we did ask people about the maturity of AI-based solutions, and I did, talking from RSA, that all of the overhype from AI is getting better. We still, in our survey, find the vast majority of people think that AI is immature and maturing, which is not a bad place to be. It might be surprising that the field is not highly mature when it's been around since 1956. And I know people that have been around since 1956, and they're called mature. So the industry is a little behind the natural intelligence there. But as I say, if there's a place to be, only 5% feel like it's marketing hype, and that's not what you would think if you lobbies of security conferences. So it's better than that, but we still have a ways to go. So, Brett, you and your colleagues stick around. More science.
Thanks, Ray. I know how you feel, and I felt the same way.
So if we talk about, when we talk to people that were going to implement, especially those that were going to implement AI solutions, there's a lot of, because AI has been around for such a long time, and to some degree people don't really, because if you ask people what it is, at some point they would say oh gosh, wasn't there a definition that came from the Supreme Court that said, I don't really know what it is, but I know it when I see it? And AI was kind of like, I don't know what it is, but I haven't seen it yet. So it's when we look at people that are trying to actually put that fuzzy idea into real practice, and they look into the details and think about, because the devil is always in the details, loss of privacy due to the large quantity of data used. And I seem to remember there was some big regulation about privacy in an area of the world that has a lot of people and influences the U.S., and now even California is talking about that kind of stuff. So this is only going to get bigger. Reliance on a single master algorithm. We all know the big brother. I think most of the people in this field are science fiction. Many are science fiction fans, and we've all seen the dystopia the fear of reliance on the one true, which turns out not to be true, solution. Not understanding the limitations of the algorithms. This has been the fear since the very beginning of AI. And I'm sure Brett is going to make us all feel better with that. This is the improperly and inadequately trained solutions. Something that does not show up in our presentation, but does show up in the paper, is that respondents to the survey believes that pretty much as usual for technologies and new projects that the staff want to do, they don't have the management support, they don't have the money, and they know that they don't have the operational expense support for sending people to training to be able to implement solutions well. So you can read the bullet points. I think really it's fear of the unknown. We all want to know more. So that actually gets to the recommendations. And shoot. Okay. Barbara, would you like to speak to this one?
Well, it kind of the first one goes along with kind of the bullet points in terms of, you need to know your use cases. Besides the fact that you need to know what the data is, what looks like good data, what's data with integrity, and what algorithms use, really focus in on what you want it to do. Plan for the specific applications, preferably with quantifiable outcomes. It's a little bit along the line of the same type of advice we've given around automation. Don't make it so broad you don't know what you are doing. But very often we're looking to, especially in the security field, for artificial intelligence to kind of fill in for what we do as security analysts, not the whole thing, not necessarily the decision-making part of it, but at least to be able to present the information. So in that sense, we know what we're looking at as far as the process goes. We may not be 100% of knowing what we're seeing is really a threat if the threat is unknown. And that's where AI can come in and help. But it's kind of know what the use case is, know what the process is, know what you want to get on the outcome. And then for providers, expect skepticism in terms of the general population, because as Ray's pointed out, artificial intelligence has been a hot new thing for over 60 years. And then get specific about the technology and the results and what makes it different now. So go ahead, Ray, back to you for your input.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that for implementers, this is the advice that we give anybody implementing any kind of new technology. Know your use cases, be specific about what you're looking for. And I know as the practitioners, these are always the complaints about management. They see the advertisement in the seat pocket in front of them when they're flying somewhere, and they read AI and they can spell that, so they want to implement it. And it's not that easy. The paradox here, though, is that AI is pushing back the frontiers of what we can do. It is doing things that we didn't know it could do, at the edges. And so there is a chance to be a little forward-looking and fuzzy with use cases. But that's pretty tough. Speaking as an occasional project manager, scope creep is my greatest fear, and it's very difficult to avoid scope creep if you don't really have a well-defined use case and specific application. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up the SANS portion of this. This is our review of the survey, and I hope that you will all read it and you will all write to SANS and say how wonderful it was. And I don't have any candy to distribute or T-shirts or anything. So I'll turn it over to Brett.
Hey, thanks, Ray. I appreciate your thoughts there. And I got to tell you, I've shared your concerns with AI as it relates to how it is creeping into our society. And initially, that was a prohibitive concern for me. But I think back to my formative years when I was first opening up a checking account. And I recall spending hours at the end of the month reconciling my my ledger and making sure that checks had cleared and I had a registration of everything moving forward. And then a few years later, lo and behold, this handy online application was available via my bank, and I started doing double books. I started thinking, okay, I'll take a look at it. And I see some upsides here, meaning I can tell instantly what checks have cleared when they've cleared. I can do it from anywhere my iPhone or my mobile device will allow me. But I still didn't trust it quite enough, and I didn't want to go away from my handwritten ledger. So I did double books for a while. I'd still do my reconciliation at the end of the month. What I come to find, and I think most folk here, if they look at their data in the last check register they wrote, might have been last year to the IRS, because even now they're taking online transfers. But the last check I wrote was last year to the IRS, and I wanted to make sure I had a physical record of it. So I think that kind of echoes what we're seeing here within AI as it relates to cybersecurity. And I started peeling the layer of the onion back. I came across a couple of analogies that gave me some comfort. One is, if anyone ever watches Netflix, do you ever wonder why they have recommendations as to what movies they think you'll like? It's not because they called your mom, or they see you live in a certain area and therefore people in your area will like it. It's because they apply an artificial intelligence methodology across looking at your past viewings and even some of your ratings, and then looking at other folks within your viewership and making recommendations as to what they liked and applying it toward yours. But even more compelling was when you look at something like an insurance actuarial. Most of us have life insurance, and in order to derive to the penny of the number that they're going to charge you each month, they ask you a set of questions, and usually it's about a 2-page form if you're lucky, sometimes 4 or 5 if you got a very high dollar insurance policy. And those questions are pretty fundamental to how you live your life, and they correlate to how long you'll live, which helps them determine how much your policy is worth and how much you're going to pay each month. And what I thought was, wow, they asked me 20 questions. How long my parents live? Do I skydive? Do I smoke? Where do I live in the country? How many miles do I drive back and forth to work? And they came up with a very high confident number. They had high confidence in the number that they're going to charge me, and still made money. So it gave me pause for comfort. And again, I'd harken back to the time when I did double books on my checking account, and now I don't even look at it. So one of the things that I'm constantly asked, and let me move forward here, I guess if I have one slide to show, this might be the one. And let me see if I can share my webcam so you can see what's going on here in the background. Sure. But fundamentally, what Cylance does is we take an artificial intelligence approach toward judging whether or not a file is safe to run. And the way we do that is pretty simple. It was really based about 6 years ago on an experience by my founder, Stuart, one of the smartest men I know. He was speaking in upstate New York to a group of cybersecurity professionals. And at the time, he worked for a competitor of ours who was a signature-based vendor. Their methodology was using DAT files or signatures to determine whether or not a file was safe to run. Someone stopped him in the middle of his lecture, and they asked him a very pointed question, and they were dogged with their determination about making him answer. And the question was this: Stuart, stop what you're doing, turn your PC around, and show me in your system tray what cybersecurity methodology you're using. And he, being a professional lecturer and very good in front of a crowd, he tried to dodge the question. He tried to he tried to get around it, and the questioner was very determined to see exactly that. And he stopped, and he paused a moment. He says, okay, I got to tell you, I'll be honest, I don't run any cybersecurity methodology on my PC. And kind of a gasp emitted from the crowd. The reason for that was because Stuart, after years and years of looking at various viruses, various pieces of malware, he was able to determine within his comfort level if a file is safe to run or not, even before it executes, just within his experience level. And some of the things he would ask himself are, hey, who sent this to me? You know, if it's from his wife, it's a high confidence, it's a safe file. How large is this file? You know, is she asking me to pick up some groceries and it's a huge file? Well, that seems to be a little odd. And he got to thinking to himself, how can I take that wisdom and distribute that so I'm protecting every user under the sun and every device under the sun? And keep in mind, this is about 5 or 6 years ago. AWS was just in its formative stages, a release starting to blossom and bloom. And he thought, you know, if I were to take this and take a portable executable file and ask questions of it, if I asked enough questions of it, I could determine with very high confidence if this file is safe to run or not. And he thought, how can I do this? The only way to do that was to develop a math model that was in the cloud. So with that, let me show you exactly how that looks. But before, let's compare and contrast, because I spent the prior 10 years in determining and spreading the good word about signatures and how that was the best way to prevent malware from spreading. So you probably all seen this before, because if you are a subscriber to a brand M or a brand S, you receive a daily DAT file. But here's how they're developed. We basically, every 24 hours, sometimes even twice in 24 hours, malware is looked at. You have to physically collect it, triage it, and classify it, meaning, is this a keylogger, or is this another piece of malware that I need to be aware of, or is this just a passive file that is viable and valid, not going to cause any danger? Then I give it to my malware researchers. They automate it, and they either put it in the cloud in the database, or they develop that signature file that then is distributed to people who have subscribed. At that point, if you're a wise security administrator, you probably test that file, because you have long memories of times when files were blacklisted that were actually viable, and they ended up breaking a lot of systems. So you put them in a mini test area, and you test them out for viability, make sure they're doing what they should, not quarantining files that are necessary for the daily use of your endpoint. And then once you are satisfied with that, you deploy them. Now, what I've found in my experience is, if everything is optimized and everything's working and running properly, the quickest you can do that is about 11 to 12 days. And part of that is having to triage and classify, making sure you are physically getting the file. That takes time, batching it, distributing it, testing it, and all that. What Ponemon says is that typically that's about 43 days, and in a global piece of malware, he's found that they exist for more than a year before they're even detected. So that was a problem for Stuart. And he thought, if I were to develop a pre-execution methodology of looking at files and determining if they're safe to run, that'd be something that people were interested in, because that's the methodology that Stuart used at the time. And he thought, yeah, how can I do that? And he ended up using artificial intelligence and machine learning, and that's what you have in the Cylance product today. So we're gonna show this here, how this works out, but this is really the secret sauce behind what Cylance does. Is we take a look at all known malware. We have terabytes and terabytes of good files and bad files, and we put it in a machine learning mechanism to develop the math model. What that does is it breaks down. Here's as technical as I'm going to get, because I'm the marketing guy. The last line of code I wrote was in BASIC in a Trash 80 in 1984. So what we do is we look at portable executable files, and the reason Cylance's logo looks like a DNA strand over a shield is just that. We break a portable executable file, or a PE file, down to its fundamental DNA. And we look at it, and we look at elements of that, and sometimes combinations of elements of that, and combinations of combinations. And we determine a statistical analysis, and we assign a value to each of those. And if you look at enough of those, you can determine with very high confidence what your confidence of that file being safe or indicative of danger is. That's fundamentally it. Then we distribute that. I've been here almost 3 years. We have had, I think, 3, and we're coming on 4 generations of our math model. That's deployed out to endpoints once every roughly 9 months or so. And the idea there is it's a distillation. The model is distilled down into something that can run on the PC. The advantage there is that you don't have to have an internet connection. So it just sits on your PC. It looks at files before they execute and determines with very high confidence if this file is safe to run or not. The idea there is, let's take a step back here. I used to run with a group of hackers, and I can tell you that while they're very hardworking and industrious, they're not very creative. And by that, I don't mean to insult them, but oftentimes the methodology is not to invent a new piece of malware, because that takes a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of cross-functional, work, what's going to be successful here, and a lot of knowledge. It's far easier to take an existing piece of malware that's available on the darknet and tweak it just slightly so that a signature doesn't recognize it. That's called a piece of zero day for those of you who run around in cybersecurity circles as I do. At that point, you've got a brand new piece of malware that doesn't have a signature, and it's very effective in whatever your objective is, being, logging passwords or logging keystrokes or distributing malware, that type of thing. So that's the far more effective way to do it. If you have a pre-execution type of AI model sitting on the PC, it foils that. You don't have to know, you don't have to have a hexadecimal code that relates to what we know malware looks like. You can look at some of the DNA elements and determine with very high confidence that this is safe to run or this is not safe to run. So fundamentally, that's the secret sauce behind what Cylance does. It's not my wisdom, but Stuart's, and I'm just glad to play a role in telling the story. Let's see here. I think we talked about this a little bit before, so I won't belabor the point. But this is again how it's done, as we just commented. So I'll close with this. People oftentimes, when they hear about AI, they think about, big brother elements or lack of privacy and things. But what I found is that when you take an approach that takes the human element out of it, that looks at a file on its fundamental DNA level and makes a recommendation after asking a whole lot of questions, what packer was used here? How big is this file? Does it make sense for it to be this big? Recency, how old is this file? Who's it from? That type of thing. It makes more sense, and that's what my customers are telling me too. Also, some people that have nodes that are out in the wild that they don't touch all the time, like an ATM machine or even retail terminals, find this valuable because you don't update it all the time. You're not daily downloading updates. We talked about the air gap networks as far as not needing an internet connection in order to be effective. And the whole prediction and prevention, a lot of people, they've actually come to the determination that prevention really isn't possible. And before the methodology we apply here at Cylance, I believe the same thing. What I found is that if you take a different approach and don't look backwards, but moreover look forwards and determine what this is doing and break it down into fundamental elements, then you can make that prevention statement and make it with high confidence. What it doesn't do, it takes out the human element. It doesn't require, a set of PCs and servers on site to be updated and such. We don't throw it up in the cloud and see, does this taste bad, smell bad, look bad? We do it in a pre-execution manner. We talked about updates of signatures. It's not a behavioral piece. The micro-virtualization talks about throwing it up in the cloud and such, and sandbox is the same. So I'm pleased to be speaking with people like the audience that I'm speaking to today, who are really looking for a solution to apply that AI. And when I see the SANS report about 75% of people looking to AI for solving their cybersecurity solutions or problems, one of the things that comes to mind is there's a brain drain out there. You have to really know what you're doing in order to be, for example, a EDR specialist, a hunting and killing specialist. And this can really help you. This approach can help you get around that brain drain in that it is a bolstering type of a solution. It can be additive and really grease the skids as far as being able to be an effective hunter and killer. So without getting too producty, I guess, that's kind of my job as a marketing professional here. I'm a believer. I want to help you be a believer too. If there's something I can do to bridge that gap, I'm at your service, and I think my email is available on these slides. So if not, it's blenmark@cylance.com. Lenmark, it's like Denmark with an L. And I'm honored to speak with you. I'll take questions as they may arise. I think that's the end of my presentation here. Carol or Alec, any questions I should address? Or
there we go.
Yeah, thanks for that great. Thanks for that great presentation. We have some questions ready for the Q&A. However, if anyone has a question for our presenters, please enter it into the questions window now. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I see that Ray has something for you. Go ahead, Ray.
So, Brett, here's a question, and I don't know the answer to this question. You may not. But as Barb and I were putting together the survey, and especially looking over the historical nature of AI, and I'm not going to guess how long you've been around in the industry, but apparently you've been around for a little while too, and that the concept of AI has been around, but perceptions and understanding is changing. And the SANS audience in particular is very technical. We like to know stuff. We give people certifications, and we beat them until they learn everything in the books. So we were all, Barb and I were looking around for places to learn more, to send people. We didn't find anything great. I'm sure that the Cylance University is spinning up generic AI training, but are there places? Obviously, we prefer vendor-neutral training, but
sure.
Do you see organizations that are fostering more education around this?
Yeah, that's a great question, because really, from a Cylance point of view, the buck stops at my desk. Part of my job is to evangelize and help bridge that gap between the concern of Big Brother and privacy issues and what is AI actually doing. And really the desire of most people I talk to of, it's not necessarily they want to employ an AI solution. What the people that I speak to want to do is to do what they do today, tomorrow, with less risk. And that's what we call business continuity in marketing language here. The first place I'd point you would, and I'd be remiss if I didn't, would be the Cylance website. But we've got and the reason I do so is because part of the thought leadership piece comes in the blogs that we put out. And really for the cutting edge, I rely on people like Anthony Freed, who is out there pointing people in that direction. So that would be the first stop. The second one would be, reach out to me via email, and I'm happy to guide you specifically if there's something, that's applicable to the challenges that you're facing in the field, rather than broad brush it. But there's lots of them out there. The first place I'd go would be the Cylance blog site.
So of course, duly noted. Thanks. Off ball. You owe me now.
All righty. One for Ray.
So the other thing was that you talked about the Cylance solution looking at a PE file, looking at the characteristics of a PE file.
Right.
This is an example of the sort of thing that helps make AI real.
Right.
We can all understand, we've been in SANS classes in 610, the reverse engineering malware class, say, and we get a PE file, and we know tools to look at that and understand what certain parameters are. Do
Sure.
you have any particular knowledge of what parameters Cylance might look at for PE files? Just an example.
I do, and some of them I could even talk about.
That's right. I didn't expect all of them, but I thought,
sure.
Maybe some possibilities.
Yeah, sure. So nominally, I listed a few of them before, but one of the ones that really arose. Well, let me take the blocking and tackling would be the things like recency, how big the file is it doing what it purports to be doing? Meaning, is it a simple file that's huge, or is it a relatively compact file that is commensurate with the activity that it should be doing? But one of the ones that occurred to me about a year ago started when we've all done RSA for a few years, and we've seen the evolution whereby you couldn't swing a dead chicken without hitting, 4 or 5 people barking about AI within their cybersecurity solution, which is natural. I understand it. But one of the questions I started asking was, what is your AI doing within your solution? And the big determination I found there was, is it there to support your existing or your traditional signature-based approach, or is it there for making convictions? And one of the things that I found as I started talking to our data analysts here was that they had learned that one of the larger vendors was using AI for only 2 elements of the PE file. And that was this: would it detect one of 2 packers that had a packer is a way to, I know you guys know this more than I do, to condense down code into a relatively portable file, hence the term PE. But if you were using, there were several known packers that were highly correlated with malware. And what we found was that people who were claiming AI were only using it for a very small part of conviction, meaning if you were using these packers, it would become more suspect, and that's what they use to make convictions. The contrast to that would be if you have a 100% artificial intelligence based conviction, meaning you're not using heuristics, you're not using signatures, you're not throwing it up in the cloud and testing it to see what it does before you make that conviction. That was the big differentiator. So again, the one question I would ask was, what is your AI doing for you within your conviction structure? I don't know if that answers your question. It was kind of a roundabout way of getting there, but that's what occurred to me, Ray, when you asked me the question. If you can if I missed it, I'm happy to do my best or take it offline too.
No, that's great. It seems like it's sort of an expansion on what we currently do with IOCs. Look for, as you say, the file size, but other characteristics that we haven't looked at before. Right. So thanks for that. I'm going to give it back to Carol because other people want to ask questions. So Thank you very much.
You bet, Ray.
All right, thank you both. We do have a question for Brett. How effective is Cylance at protecting end-of-life OSs such as XP or 2003 server, which are still in use in enterprise and IoT?
Yeah, great question, because what I found is, it's easy when you've got a whole litany of endpoints, PCs and whatnot that are on the latest, but oftentimes the crown jewels of your corporation, meaning something that's running a production environment in the back room that you can't update because there's no software available for it. So you take the risk of infection by malware, or maybe even losing data that's within that piece of equipment because you can't update it. There's really no updates for that. What I found, we have a technology, or more like a theory, I guess, called temporal predictive advantage. What that's stating is that the models that we deploy today are effective against a future type of variants of malware, and the converse is true as well. And by that I mean, if you look at a piece of malware that came out today, if you were to go back and look at Cylance models 2, 3, 4 generations ago, how far back would the model have predicted that? It's a very promising technology, and by that I mean, I think our average months back of models, forgive me for coining a term, but if you were to go back a model that was developed, 24 months ago, it would protect against the current malware that you see today that is causing, say, signature vendors to go and reissue a new DAT file to protect today because they didn't have one tomorrow. So the short answer to that is far more effective than signature vendors, but as you might suspect, it really depends on what you're looking at. Windows 95, if you got a problem like that, then if you got something working on that, there's likely you'll have challenges too. If you use a mechanism that is effective months before, then it's a better approach. kind of a long-winded answer. If you want to reach out to me privately, I'm happy to link you with some SEs who could speak to it probably far more eloquently than I can. But that's my thoughts on a high level.
All right, thank you. Where can one go to learn about AI at the same level as, say, SEC 401 or even 301? I don't know the answer, and I don't know who does, but I genuinely want to know. Maybe Barb or Ray, you could address that one first.
Ray, you might be more. Go ahead.
Yeah, this was essentially the question that I asked before. So we've got folks who come to SANS and are looking for SANS level AI training. Maybe we should hire somebody away from Cylance and get them to put together an AI class. I think that question has already been addressed, but thanks, Carol.
All right, thanks, Ray. How does AI tie in with other trends such as automation?
Yeah, I've got some thoughts there, but I don't want to cut off Barb or Ray, so I'm happy to pile on if necessary.
I'm sure you're going to add, Brett. I just came off the automation survey. I think it probably goes hand in glove in a lot of ways, because it carries you out of a basic automation process that you might get by scripting within a tool and start to look at how you can bring information together from various sources and actually correlate them intelligently and make sense of them. And it creates efficiencies. I think I tend to see them hand in glove moving forward.
Yeah, Barb, I'd agree with that. Let me cite it as an example: endpoint detection and response. So EDR, for most of you, you're aware that this is kind of a hunting and killing technology to go and ask among your environment, show me where this piece of malware exists, show me where this MD5, this SHA-264 might exist. And what we're finding is that while it's a very effective technology, there's a couple of challenges with it. One is that in order to be an effective threat hunter and killer, this is not something you probably hire off of Craigslist. This is someone who has been dyed in the wool in cybersecurity and probably has come up through the ranks of distributing DAT files and looking at malware and tracing it. Even if it's a matter of calling up the heads of departments, is used to be EDR 101 to say, who's opened this Excel file that had a macro that is now capturing passwords or exfiltrating, malware, that type of thing. So what I found is that in combination, AI, the AI approach that we take with an EDR solution, gives you the ability to, one, not have to sift and siphon through a sea of data in order to find out where malware is propagating and where it's doing its damage. But it lets you focus, and also it really steepens the learning curve on a threat hunter who is trying to really, build their chops, to coin a guitar term, and lets him be more effective in his job. Also, steepens that curve where he's not sifting through everything to find out where malware is propagated, and then determining, what does he want to do with it? Does he want to, watch it, do nothing, kill it, that type of thing. So EDR is a great example. When you automate your first line defense with EDR, with an AI approach, it's really far more effective. And we're talking, not 1 on 1 is 3, but exponentially.
All right, I think we have time for one last question. What are the key factors to be considered in establishing an AI solution?
Well, I can offer my insights, but I'll let the SANS team chime in first.
Yeah, this is Ray. Let me first just respond to the way the question's asked. That an AI solution, because as an engineer or project manager, I'm really not about the tool, the AI enablement. We want a solution that works. So as we said before, think about your use case, the problem you're trying to solve. But mostly I'd go back to our recommendations, our first one for implementers. Think about what you're trying to do. Make sure you're using the right tool for the job. Make sure you understand all you can about the tool, and you have you have good, well-defined business requirements. But as I think I said before, I've gotten burned by scope creep before, so that's always my preventative action. Barbie, anything you want to add?
I would say that, plus don't underestimate the quality of the data. You know, the projects that I'm involved in, it can, I hate to say it can make or break you. And people can tend to dumb down the quality of the data, not spend enough time to understand its variances. You might have to concentrate that on the upfront side, and it might be kind of I'll say a one-time thing, but even so, it's a place that you need to pay some implementation attention to. And with that, I'll hand it to Brett.
Yeah, Ray, Barb, I think you're right on. What I found, and I know we're at the top of the hour, but to be succinct, it's hard for a marketing guy here, but what AI is best at is recognizing patterns that are imperceptible to the human comprehension. So if you, as Ray mentioned, if you look at what you're trying to achieve and see how the data, if you look at it in a finite slice and dice enough and use a mechanism that's been proven over time, I think that's a good high-level approach. But again, reach out to me directly if you have any further questions on this. I'm happy to give you my thoughts or bring in someone who's far smarter than me offline. It's been an honor to speak with you today.
Likewise,
right.
Thanks, everybody.
And as Brett said, we are out of time. Thank you so much, Ray, Barb, and Brett, for your great presentation, and to BlackBerry Cylance for sponsoring this webcast, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, please visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.